Hello, everyone, and welcome back to
Welcome to the
Cybersecurity
Cybersecurity and Cloud
This is your host,
Podcast, the
Francesco,
podcast where we
and
learn
today
from
we are
cybersecurity
talking
experts
again
how
about
to
a
stay
very
safe,
interesting
private, and
topic,
secure
and
on
we've
the
been
cloud
talking
and in
about
code. CSCP is hosted by
Irene, a
Francesco
little bit about
Cipollone, your
we've been calling
cybersecurity
this
friend with a
last
passion
month
for all
the
things
Shawshank
cyber
month
and
because
sharing stories of other
I'm talking about
professionals
threat
with you.
modeling
This
so
episode is
much
brought to you by the
that we also
generosity
have a
of
joke
Phoenix
that is
Security
we
Limited.
smell a
Phoenix
Shawshank
helps
moment
startups
here
and
when we dive
enterprises
deeper
solve
on
complex software
Shawshank
security
discussion
supply chain
or his
visibility
famous
by
three
leveraging the
sentence.
power
But
of
without me
correlation
blabbing
and
about so
contextualization.
much,
Discover how
I
Phoenix
have
Security helps
a
CISO and
fantastic
security
guest that we've
engineers
been
act fast,
discussing
prevent
offline, the
burnout,
threat
and
modeling
implement
element,
DevSecOps
and
at
she's
the
also
speed
part
of
of the threat
cloud.
modeling
Phoenix
manifesto, but
Security.
also
Correlate,
she's the security lead for
contextualize,
Neo4j,
and act on
very
risk
famous graph
with one click.
database, and
Let's
I'm
dive
very
in.
passionate about graph and graph database, especially in cybersecurity. I wanted to have the pleasure to have this discussion in front of all of our audience. Irene, thank you so much for coming on the show. Tell us a little bit more about you, where you come from, what's your passion?
Thanks for having me on this podcast. So my background is in software development. I started as a software developer, and gradually, as you become more senior, as probably lots of people experience, you also become involved in process side of things, how your team does SDLC. So I became more and more involved in that, and it was very interesting for me. This is where I also picked threat modeling at about this time, and I thought, the company I was working for at the time lived through secure transformation, making our lifecycle secure, and I thought that was a very interesting process I would like to do more. And I worked for a consultancy for several years where I've done some pen testing. They taught me pen testing for web apps mostly, but a lot of what I was doing for them was to work with customers who needed SDLC consultancy, secure architectures, threat modeling, so more help in the defensive side. So I've done that in a couple of places, and then I felt I want to go back in-house to consolidate everything what I've learned in a role like application security lead. So I am at Neo4j for 2.5 years, and it's been very interesting so far. And in that time also we had threat modeling manifest, and recently we've published threat modeling capabilities model, which was sort of a follow-up sequel. So these are my interests: security, how you fit it in agile, lean development.
How have you found your background as a developer have helped you in application security? Has been a positive impact or a negative impact? Like, has helped you communicating with the developer but not the business, or not a problem?
I hope it helped me. It helped me. You see how developers work, how the process of creating software goes from a thought to actual deploy. You appreciate other roles involved. When you're a developer, you understand where product owners are coming from, sales, marketing, support, all the pressures on developers, the famous dream unicorn greenfield project that everyone says we will do everything right in our next greenfield development.
It
So
never
you see it from,
happens.
it never happens. When I talk to people about doing threat modeling and they tell me we will do it for our greenfield project, I have the whole pitch about that. No, your current project is out there making people insecure. Go and fix it. Anyway, but it really helps to live through it, to understand the pressures, to understand the processes in and out. And hopefully it also helps a lot on a technical level, because when you just go and tell people this is the finding, fix it, it really helps if you can understand how they would approach the fix, what are the options, what are the trade-offs, what you would recommend as a good fix, bad fix, that sort of thing.
And that's good. I think as an industry, we had a lot of application security folks that have come from left and right. I'm a developer myself, so I've been in the trenches, and I think that's the only road that, as a product security or application security, have that fight with Chris Romeo on the name. I think it's really important to understand how software works, how teams works, how agile works, how sprint works, how the interaction with a product manager works, in order to advise them on how to best act on things. Just using SLA, I think it's 2024, so that aspect of things should be dead and buried. But unfortunately, we still live with SLA and still we live with regulation. So before we jump on that discussion, though, we start the podcast with what is the state of the industry right now? What do you think application security is right now? Because it's changing so rapidly and there is so much excitement. Where do you think we are right now?
How long do I have? I think we have some exciting developments happening. So definitely I see business starting to take it more seriously compared to what it was 10 years ago when you needed to beg to do anything for security in a backlog. It's much more serious now, and sometimes it's for really good internal reasons. People understand the seriousness, and sometimes the pressure even comes from compliance, but whatever, I will take what it comes. I'm not going to look this gift horse in the mouth. The positive thing, people are taking it more seriously. I really dislike a certain aspect of our industry, which will probably lead us to our topic about risk-based fixing, but really don't like this aspect of security theater where you can demonstrate that the issue is not applicable, right? You can say, we are not using this part of the library, it's not reachable, it's not relevant. You can demonstrate it as clearly as you like, and your customer can come and tell you, my scanner says CV, high risk, I don't care, I want it to go away. And depending, if you are a giant company selling to individual users or lots of small companies, it won't impact you. But if you are a medium-sized company selling to giants and to people in highly regulated industries, when they tell you to jump, you can only ask how high and how fast you want me to jump. And this is annoying to me.
And not to take the regulator approach, PCI DSS, FedRAMP, and I had the joke that we scan with the same scanner that they scan, so that we don't lead into an argument. At least we find the same CV that they find, so at least we agree and we fix the same stuff that we fix or upgrade. I think it's an industry that is stuck on SLA because reachability analysis, and for the listener, reachability analysis, if you're using a particular library directly or indirectly, there is transitive dependency and other nuances there. But is if you can reach that piece of code in a specific library, that's fundamentally a library, just a collection of pieces of code and function that they get glued together. Now, there is a lot of argument around, yes, but sometimes those will be used. So having a dynamic reachability analysis approach will ensure that if you eventually going to use that library, that vulnerability and the likelihood of that vulnerability to manifest will manifest. I think there is a lot of skepticism around, there is a lot of excitement, but also skepticism around reachability analysis, especially with the RASP and people saying reachability analysis should be just in production because you know when things are loaded, or static analysis where you can actually do all the permutation of the path. But let's not get into that rabbit hole. I do agree with you that fundamentally, if you're a big organization, you can dictate to everybody around you what security should look like. And application security is not very mature. So even just fixing vulnerability, I see the other aspects, like fixing vulnerability as soon as possible, it's a good thing. I've also seen an approach with the VEX and the SPOM where you can declare where something is actually not reachable or something is partially reachable. You can add justification where you're never going to fix that particular vulnerability. Nonetheless, you have on the opposite side the case of Ivanti, where you have vulnerability in an operating system that all of a sudden will pop open, especially on physical appliance. It's really difficult to have that argument. If you are developing a SaaS platform, I'm totally with you. Like you are in control of the full SDLC of your full environment. But if you're deploying appliances, you should really try to update them as much as possible, because it's really hard to actually rip and replace. And we had plenty of cases like SolarWinds, like Avanti, firewalls that use very legacy version of Linux, and it's difficult to upgrade fundamentally, especially if you leave the upgrade to the user. But I am with you on the fact that it's an exciting moment. There is a lot of change. I think Dennis yesterday at the WASP celebration said, it feels like we're back in the beginning of the days where there is a lot of excitement, and we have a blank slate right now to define what application security looks like in the next 20 years. And hopefully next 20 years will be at the same point. But
yeah, I watched Denis's talk about Gen AI and future of AppSec given Gen AI. We'll see. Hopefully, it's a really exciting transformation. Particularly, what several years ago it was big data will change everything. It did change things. Did it change everything? Not quite. I think.
I do agree. I think that there is. I have a joke because you either love it or hate it. It's like Marmite, AI and LLM. It's not new, but right now I think we got the adoption worldwide. So we got a lot of worldwide excitement about AI. So anything AI specific gets excited. So we got a lot of acceleration in the last 2 years of that, because with excitement comes investment, hence comes acceleration. But I think I've seen a couple of use cases where it will help, I think, augment the human. So if you take LLM as the solution of everything, like any technology, you'll fail. But if you look at AI as a way to give you the exoskeleton, the super armor to any application security professional at 10x application security, or can analyze any security practice, I think you're on to something and you're on to a win, because it can accelerate a lot of the boring part. It can also mislead you to wrong path. So you shouldn't take Google as the source of truth. You should look at things critically. And because it's such an amazing technology, I think we might go and have a lot of experts or AI experts or security experts based on AI responses.
I'm sure I already see a lot of content that feels to me like it was written by. What I feel the direction that looks very promising to me at the moment is to have this power of generative AI, but instead of it being pure fantasy, go over the internet, pick up every stupid thought that exists there and generate based on that. You can ground it on some kind of curated collection, dare I say knowledge graph. And we are experimented internally a lot with that, and it does produce interesting results. And lots of the use cases are perfect for application security, because lots of security data is a very graphy data by its nature. So we are playing a lot with reducing hallucinations, but it's more than reducing hallucinations, is using generative AI based on a curated knowledge that is organized in a graph, which can be ontology, can be other type of relationship, but it plays quite nicely together. And I think we will see much more in this direction.
This episode is brought to you by the generosity of Phoenix Security Limited. Phoenix helps startups and enterprises solve complex software security supply chain visibility by leveraging the power of correlation and contextualization. Phoenix platform connects to your repositories, scanners, and cloud, correlates all the information, and provides you with a prioritized list of vulnerabilities that need to be addressed first. Discover how Phoenix Security helps CISOs and developers remove friction and maximize the use of DevSecOps professionals at phoenix.security. Phoenix Security, correlate, contextualize, and act on risk with one click.
Yeah, I think what we see right now is the first generation of Gen AI, widely applicable, but it's like a newspaper. It's not specialized in anything, but it inform everyone of a topic, and then you can query it. But as soon as you get into the specific, then his knowledge is very generic. So it's like asking a generalist about reachability analysis, just to make an example. But if you train it on specific data sets, if reachability analysis is good, and then it becomes an expert on localized or local tree knowledge, then it becomes really interesting because it can give you
Yes.
very precise answer and the hallucination chances are less. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see the next generation models that are personally trained on this.
I am excited as well. I mean, I'm not excited about all of the technology, and sometimes I'm a bit of
Skeptical.
loaded. I don't know. Like, for example, smart homes, Internet of Things. I hate all of that. Gen AI.
No, I think it's definitely a technology that leads to a specific direction. And going back in circle on the threat modeling, I've seen a lot of interesting application of AI-based threat modeling that
Yes.
I think threat modeling is seen a little bit as a mystical art. It's very
Sometimes, yes.
niche.
Sometimes that's part of my. I've done several trainings when it was part of my job to deliver trainings, but for myself at conferences, what I usually do is a workshop, and it can be 2-3 hours workshop, and by the end of it, participants produce a reasonable threat model. That's part of my passion to say it's not an obscure dark art, it's teachable, and a methodology is repeatable. So if you teach the idea of stride quickly and you produce a model for something in a reasonable scope. Okay, obviously I bring examples that I know can be done in an hour and a half, but realistically we also do it in real world with real applications, and you can do a lot in an hour and a half. But my point is it's teachable. You can teach people this methodology and they will go out and do their own threat modeling. It's not magic, it's like a cookbook, right? So
Mhm.
some people are amazing chefs and some people are competent at home, and you will not produce maybe a Michelin star dish in your first attempt, but it will be tasty, nutritious. So,
You can iterate it. You can iterate and become
and
a
you can
better cook.
improve, and you can improve definitely, but it's teachable. That's my point. It's not a dark art.
But it's seen a little bit as a dark art, like
Okay, adds to my mystique. Then good.
where's your mantle? And how do you like one of my pet peeve and something that I'm discussing a lot of recently is threat modeling can look very aloof, very generic, while
Mm-hmm.
engineers, especially if you come from security, when you need to assign specific tasks on actionable threat modeling. I'm very passionate about making threat modeling actionable on very specific things because as an engineer practice, they need to take that and
Yeah.
put it in the backlog dedicated story point. So if it's not a well-defined story, then it becomes the threat model lose the sense. And if they do it themselves, then they could potentially start thinking about how to implement it. And we'll touch probably later on the security champion topic. But how do you make threat modeling actionable? How do you link it to the whole life cycle of doing some work on a sprint by
Um,
sprint?
that's a very good question. So I will talk specifically what I'm doing right now, but it's very much in the spirit of what I was telling everyone to do when I was a consultant. So there is no disconnect here of walking the walk and talking the talk. Threat modeling, to me, will only thrive as a practice if it's tied to how you do development in general. So in our circumstances, we have really strong self-organizing teams that own their process. And it may be different in different organizations, but for us, strong teams that are truly self-organized that own their process. And the way for threat modeling to work is for them to embrace threat modeling as part of their process and to see the value of it. So we started quite small by injecting something that's called security prompt. There is a really good blog on it. I can send the link later. And it was like the initial step into the world of threat modeling. It said every time you start working on a card, like would be Jira card for most people, for us it's a Trello card, doesn't matter. Every time you start working on it, ask yourself what this change gives to a potential attacker that they didn't get before. What can go wrong with this change? And when I was introducing it to people, I've read a joke somewhere that, to my mind, is a really good example of, say, you phone a hairdresser's salon and you say, "Can I cancel my appointment tomorrow?" And they say, "Sorry, sir, that's less than 24 hours. We will have to charge you. But you are our valuable customer and we have a new feature. You can now move it free of charge." And then you say, "Okay, can I move it for the next week?" "Yes, of course." "And now that it's not 24 hours in advance, can I cancel it?" So this new feature gave an attacker a new capability. And so you tell the joke to engineers, you pause before the punchline and you say, "Can you guess what the customer will do now?" And most of the time they can guess. And you go, "If you can guess it, here you are. That's your security prompt. What can go wrong with this new feature that the attacker didn't have before?" And
So
from
would you call
that,
that agile threat modeling?
I wouldn't call that. I had a very interesting
Or rapid threat modeling?
panel with Adam, and they said, "Oh, this security prompt is like a gateway drug to threat modeling." And he was like, "No, to me, it's a full-scale threat modeling. We shouldn't minimize it." People thought what we are building, what can go wrong. And from there you go, what you're going to do about it and all that. And I guess you can say, did we do a good enough job? We've done a good job, we can improve it. And from that, we are going to a more formal threat modeling. Again, in our environment, I've decided not to start with a tool. I've decided to start with manual threat modeling, not face-to-face in a room because we are a distributed organization. All the teams are distributed. So we use Mira. I never know how to call this tool correctly.
Mirror.
Mira, okay. We use Mira, we have a template. We create our threads as sticky notes on a template. And the question you asked, how we fix things, it's part of the team's responsibility after the session. Turn these sticky notes to cards on your backlog. And then, of course, you get lots of interesting questions. How do you prioritize? If a threat modeling session produced 50 potential threats, how do you prioritize them? And I don't have an answer, but luckily I didn't yet have a threat modeling session that produced 50 threats.
Oh, that's interesting. And it leads me to another question that is, do you think the smaller threat modeling on an individual feature might lead you blindsided versus a more comprehensive approach? Like you're working on each feature and maybe you're focusing on authentication. I'll just give you an example, or on a database set of feature and API. So you focus on that level of threat modeling, what could go wrong. And then you have a bigger fire on maybe the API front end that is open. You'll get eventually there, maybe, if you're still touching that piece of code. But my question is, wouldn't a more comprehensive approach be comprehensive? Or if you get stuck to that and you never do the other one because the other one is fast, agile, and a time bound versus the bigger one might take an hour, 2 hours. So is that the gateway drug to actually not doing threat modeling?
That's a really good question. So I was always advocating what I call incremental threat modeling. For 99% of the people who don't start on a greenfield project, they need to improve on their existing project somehow. And when I say incremental, I mean focus on the next delivery, next sprint, next feature. Focus on the changes you are introducing and threat model these, and then you know you're not making the existing situation worse. But And it's a very powerful approach. It gets people started today instead of waiting for this unicorn project, and it's in manageable chunks. It's a really good approach, and I'm not trying to diminish it, but it's not enough for exactly the reason you've described. If you only threat model stuff that is changing, that's not good enough. And
Mhm.
as a developer, I don't know if you came across one of these books that say how to achieve test coverage on a legacy code. That's exactly the advice they give to you. When you touch a piece of code, write tests around it. And when you add new code, obviously write tests to it. And gradually you will tame this legacy beast. You will have coverage on the code that matters. And maybe it works for functional quality, because if no one is complaining about bugs in a feature, it either means it doesn't have functional bugs, or it means no one is using it and it doesn't matter. Unfortunately, it's not true for security bugs, because if you have a vulnerable code deployed and no one complaining about it, doesn't mean that attackers didn't find a
That
remote code
nobody's
execution
using.
in it. Yes, exactly. It doesn't matter that no one is using it legitimately. If it's out there and it's vulnerable, then it might be you have RC. And I
Actually might
used to
be
have
more vulnerable because
exactly
nobody's using it.
no
It
one
might
is
leave you
using it.
blindsided.
I had a slide in my presentation on this topic where I took some of these famous bugs, the ones that have their own logo and theme song and all that. And if you calculate the gap between when they were introduced and when they were discovered, it's measured in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. There were bugs that were introduced in early Linux versions and they were discovered 20 years later in really popular utilities. So it's not true in security what is true for functional quality. In security, what you do not know can harm you. So that's
Hmm.
one reason why incremental is not enough. The other reason is the whole is more than the sum of its parts.
I love that.
Yeah, it's definitely true in security. So we have, I'm waving my hands, but we won't have video. So I hope it's still
We'll
clear.
have some of the recording. We'll have some of the recording, or we can translate it. But usually we also post some of the video snippets. So maybe get capturing one of our snippets.
Yeah, so we have a subcomponent A and we've threat modeled it. We think it's secure. And we have subcomponent B that another team developed and threat modeled and it's secure. But the way they talk to each other, no one threat models that, and you can introduce tons of vulnerabilities that way. Yes, incremental, I like it. I still think it's a great approach. I preach it and I practice it, but it's not enough. You need to tackle the whole system at some point. And you can start at a super high level, just get representatives from all the involved teams together, get a super high level context picture of your system, and then you need to know where to start. So use whatever data you have, use pen test, use vulnerability scanners to maybe give you some idea where some kind of heat map, right? Where do I start? And start from there.
And I love that because that is also a gateway to my next question, that is, if you do PR change and code change scan, wouldn't that give you blindsided if you do full scan?
Do
You might
both.
not exactly, but
Do
there is a lot of
both.
push. There is a lot of push with just PR change scan because they're faster, they're leaner. You
Yeah.
can integrate them in CI/CD, and the big bulky full SaaS scan, usually they're slower. You need to build parallel pipeline to make it
Mm-hmm.
agile. They leave you backlog. I think both are important because one give you the immediacy, but there is a lot of push to actually do fast, quick, very quick
Okay.
scan, and then you'll be secure. I disagree.
I disagree as well. We do both. And nothing is ideal. PR scans that tell you only touch the delta, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they bring issues that are nothing to do with the PR. And developers ask me, can I ignore it? It has nothing to do with my PR. And my answer is, first of all, yes, let's ignore it so you can get on with your workflow. Even if it's a real one, we will look at it out of sync. Because I see my first job as not to block developers, as one who bring value, and they essentially their work is what pays my salary. So not to block the developers, not to stand in the way of future work. So if PR analysis accidentally brought issues that's nothing to do with the PR, first of all, let's unblock the developer, and then we can look if it's a real issue or not. Going on a tangent here, team topologies. Are you aware of team topologies?
I like that, but
Yes.
I have another tricky one that is back on the threat modeling and the finding.
Yeah.
Would you ever evidence a threat modeling finding or discovery using the vulnerability information that you have? If you have a CWE-based authentication issue, and then you have 50 authentication issue in your code, would you do that match, or is too much of a leap of faith?
Sometimes you can. There is a threat modeling methodology that I didn't use personally, but I know it exists. It's called PASTA, I think, and that's what it's advocating for. Validate your threat models, but I never played with it myself, so I don't know how it works in practice. But sometimes you can, yeah.
And I think it's interesting because it brings, right now, the vulnerability management and threat modeling are seen as two different parts of application security, and for me, they are not. They should be the same kind of block. It's like you manage bug, you find bug, you might find bug with a scanner, you might find bug with a threat modeling exercise. They still need to be part of your same backlog. How do you prioritize the action? I think vulnerabilities are a bit more precise because they manifest in a particular piece of code, so you can get an immediate action on it. While threat modeling finding might be, you might have a problem of authentication because an attacker might exploit that authentication. How you fix it, you need to think about it, you need to propose a fix. So you have a generic CWE, but you don't have a fix. You don't have a vulnerability in itself or a finding in itself. You need to create the findings. And that's, I think, why a lot of people are struggling with bringing these two words together. But for me, they're part of the same cycle. What do you think?
I agree. I agree. Give an example. So early on, one of the first pen tests on my watch, we had an issue to do with SSRF, and you don't fix SSRF by changing one line of code. It's a complex thing to fix. You change things on multiple layers, application, network.
An SSRF, for who is not deep into what's top 10, is server-side request forgery.
Yeah, it's not an easy issue to fix. There is a really good OWASP guide on it, actually, and it explains, are you type 1 situation, are you type 2 situation? And we are in a complex situation because our product is all about make sense of the data. So we allow our users to bring data from anywhere. Anyway, so we fixed it, we tested it, all good quality fix. But since then, we have, I think, organizational awareness. And when our scanner finds something that touches on SSRF, people tend to take it more seriously because I guess there is this institutional memory. It used to be a pain point.
We call it
In
PTSD.
phantom pains, which I think is not a bad thing. It helps you to contextualize issues. And I guess in threat models, we always ask ourselves, would we open ourselves to being vulnerable to something like that again?
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting approach, and I don't know, it's something to dig a little bit more deeper. And I don't think we figure out the best way to validate or take these issues into a backlog and put that issue into work. But we're coming close to the end of the podcast. Unfortunately, I have 4,000 other questions I'll discuss with you, Irene, because I love this kind of deep technical discussion. It gets me going. But we have a tradition in the podcast that is, how do you, to leave everybody with a warm and fuzz feeling, and considering we discuss about cross-site scripting and SSRF, is not the warmest feeling that we can leave people. So if you want to leave with a last positive message, what would that message be?
You can do it.
I can do it.
You definitely can do it, but
you can do it. You can make it happen.
In various meetups, people approach me and say, I'm new, I'm the first security hire. I read all these blogs by Google and it's like different universe. What can I do in my small organization that is not, on the cutting edge? So my message to the people, your security hire number 1 or number 2, doesn't matter. You can do it. The first threat modeling conference, I think the theme was threat modeling is for everyone. And application security can feel like a bottomless pit, and you feel like
despair.
There is no hope. I just want everyone to come out of it. You can do it. You can make difference. You can make things better. Do not despair.
I think it's a very good positive message. I would add to that also seek mentorship, because we are usually understaffed and surrounded by a lot of developers, so can feel daunting if you're the first one that does application security. Feel a very hostile environment because you're getting into other people's job and tell them their code is not so great. So usually, unless there is that culture and that support, it can feel very lonely. So seek mentorship, like use OWASP as a community, get together, because it's fun if we make it fun, and you can do it. I definitely subscribe to that. Brilliant. Irene, thank you so much for coming on this show. This was a brilliant conversation. I really enjoyed it. If people want to discover more about Neo4j, I know you guys have a blog on specific element of the reachability analysis, on the threat path analysis, and about you and the threat modeling manifesto. Where they can find more about you?
About me, I think I have my contacts on LinkedIn. Please approach me. It says I am open for mentoring and questions and all that. I also still have a professional account on the horrible application known as X. you can find
Twitter.
You can find me there. Yes, legacy Twitter.
And for the blog and Neo4j, do you have any particular blog that you're particularly proud of, or you want to recommend? Or
so Neo4j has a very interesting blog on using Gen AI and knowledge graphs for various use cases, including security. I can send a specific link if you publish links with the podcast.
Yeah, we'll publish the link. We'll publish the link in the show notes and all the connection with Irene. But absolutely, an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And everybody, you can do it. Stay safe out there and do threat modeling, both agile and comprehensive. So you can capture the most.
That's a very good message.
Thank you very much, and goodbye.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please leave us a review on Apple Podcast and post it on social media tagging Cybersecurity Cloud Podcast for a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. Discover other episodes at www.cybersecuritypodcast.com.